So before we begin today's review, I just want to say something. Milk and peppers, not a good combination. Really don't know how Bowie did it for all of those years. Well, it's probably the cocaine. Definitely the cocaine. What is going on, guys? ScorpionSlayer66 here, coming at you for another essential album review. And today we will be talking about David Bowie's 1976 album, Station to Station. So as stated, this album was released in 1976, and it is a very important album in David Bowie's career. He was transitioning from his Ziggy Stardust era to what would become known as the Berlin Trilogy, which would begin work in 1977. And this album is a very cool center point between the two eras, because we were going from Ziggy Stardust, Young Americans, very funk, soul, like Philadelphia area inspired music, to we would be getting to this very krautrock, electronic music recorded in Germany. And it's just such a fascinating piece of his discography, because you look at it and it's completely different from everything else, but it has a lot of elements of everything. So the original working title for this album was actually Golden Years, which is the second track on the album. Obviously, if you're a fan of Bowie, you definitely recognize that this still has a lot of Ziggy Stardust and Young Americans influence to it. Very funky, very soul-inspired, and it was the first song recorded for the album. But it's kind of interesting because the rest of the album is going to be so much different. Like, even just look at the title track, the first song on the album, Station to Station. This song is a 10-minute magnum opus of showing one's emotions, but also putting on a front that everything's okay and that you'll be fine. Throughout the whole song, no matter how many times the tempo changes or the pace changes, Bowie still has this very fragile nature to his voice, but he always has that trademarked Bowie confidence to it. So there's glimpses and moments where you feel that he's kind of going inward and being self-conscious, but then he puts on this face that he's confident, he's overconfident even at times. And that's something really special about this album, because pretty much every song on here, besides arguably Golden Years, there's that little bit of fragileness that really was completely different from David Bowie's other work, which was so confident and full of itself. But just to keep talking about Station to Station for another minute, this is my absolute favorite David Bowie song. It's 10 minutes long, but it never feels like it's 10 minutes. Due to how often the chord progression changes and the tempo, like I was mentioning earlier, the song keeps interesting and very fresh, and that refrain of him saying "The Return of the Thin White Duke," one of the sexiest lines Bowie has ever said in a song. It sounds so chocolatey, smooth, and confident, but then it breaks up the rest of the album. It's just such an amazing opening track, and like I said, my absolute favorite from Bowie. Along with being very emotionally charged and very fragile in terms of the whole album, this album really started Bowie's love of exploring things like higher powers, things beyond ourselves, and that's most evident on this album on the closing song on side one, which is Word on a Wing. I made a quip earlier in the intro for the video that cocaine was a huge part of this album, and no song is more evident of that than this one in specific, because you can tell Bowie was amid some like coke freakout or some existential crisis during a coke binge, and he wrote almost a blatant call for help on this song. He keeps saying, like, you know, I need help with things, and it's just really interesting because a lot of the time with drugs and music, they are very subtly referenced, or they're way too referenced. And I think Bowie had a really nice medium where drugs aren't really mentioned in the song at all, but you can tell that's exactly what he is asking for forgiveness for or needing help for. And it's just such a beautifully written song, because if you think about it in the mind state of like that particular situation, it just creates like this beautifully haunting but uplifting song, and the perfect way to close out the first side. Another song that was very fueled by the cocaine that was consumed during the making of this album is TVC15. So the story goes with this one that during a coke binge, Bowie and Iggy Pop were having a freak out that the TV set in Bowie's house was eating his girlfriend alive. And so Bowie just kind of took that really black comedy, dark comedy moment and made it into this really like upbeat kind of piano-led ballad, just talking about going after your girlfriend, going through a TV. And it's just so bizarre because it's so, like I said, dark comedy in nature, but yet it's still so uplifting and fun in its own right. It's a really different change of pace, especially with ending side one with Word on a Wing, but I think it was kind of a really interesting way to energize the album and to keep people invested after such a big emotional song like that. So again, another awesome track, definitely a highlight off the album. So after the madness of TVC15, we have a pretty straightforward funk rock ballad with the song Stay. And Stay is very pivotal to the album because, much like Golden Years, it shows the transitional power that this album had. Apparently this is another song that was recorded during the Young Americans era and just simply didn't make it, but it has so many elements of Young Americans, but it still sounds so perfect in the grand scheme of this album because we go from a very eclectic and weird song to kind of grounding people back in reality. And it's just a really great song to follow up an interesting track like TVC15, and definitely one of the better vocal performances on the album for me. So closing out the very tight 6-track listing, we have the cover of Johnny Mathis and Nina Simone's Wild as the Wind. I really love this song because I love the message behind it, because Bowie throughout the album has shown all of this overconfidence but showing little bits of fragility, but this song was very open in terms of emotions because he's talking about, you know, I'm a little bit wild, I'm a little bit crazy, but this one person shows me love and affection, and as long as I have her, I have this emotional and human side to me. And especially with like the Thin White Duke character that he was portraying for the movie The Man Who Fell to Earth, it was really an interesting song because he came across as so confident and so cocky that he really didn't need anybody, but he's saying quite the opposite, that he needs this person to feel human and to feel like a regular person. And I thought it was a beautiful way to follow up Stay, and it's a beautiful way to end it because it starts on a completely different note and it ends on a completely different note. It's a really beautiful, full piece of art, and again, just really awesome. Alright guys, so that is my little review of David Bowie's 1976 album Station to Station. Let me know down below, what's your favorite David Bowie album? What's your favorite song on the album? Let me know. And while you're down in the comments, hit that like button, subscribe, and share around. Until next time guys, take care.